another edition of The Dark Side. In this edition, we're talking about wicked witches. Now, not Wiccans or what you consider modern witches, but the classic wicked witch. The witch that's haunted history and that has been in every major civilization since the dawn of time. There's always been singular witches. So here we're going to talk about a few things. One, my interest in witchcraft. Two, some historical witches you might not know about, because in the years before the internet was created, there were things called books. Lots of books. I have lots of books in my collection. And with those books there's some forgotten bits of folklore and history. So we're going to talk about that shortly. Specifically a witch named Hulda from Sleepy Hollow, who kind of kept time with the Headless Horseman, so to speak. So we'll talk about that in a moment. Right now we're going to, I'm in my witch regalia, which is, we all have a hat, cloaks and garments and things, and very much inspired by personal witchcraft, things that matter to me. So of course it's all in black, and you should always look witchy. And what does witchy mean? We all know what it means, and we know it when we see it, and that's because there's almost a subconscious understanding of what witches are. And I'm here where I read in my dining room, and we're going to go see my witch house and a few other witchy things on my property in a little bit. But I'm here to clear up a certain misconception that, witches are all good. They're not all good. They're individuals, and that witchcraft and true witchcraft is an individual art, almost a natural born talent. And those who were born with it separated themselves from regular society, lived in cabins in the woods and outside of normalist civilization, because they knew they were different. It's something you're born to. And I think in the Harry Potter novels they kind of touched on that a little bit. That almost, I think, pissed a few people off, the idea of muggles, and that people are born, there are witches and there are people who are born naturals. And I consider myself supernatural, and that I have certain abilities. I'm a psychic, and I throw a good curse every now and then, and that's what I do. And I don't apologize for it. I don't apologize for who I am. But we deal in a modern world, and there are things like Wicca, and though it's a faith-based religion, and it was kind of created in the 1940s by Gardner and a few other people, and it was codified and turned into a religion based somewhat in ancient traditions and things. But that's speculative, and there are ancient traditions in Rome. There's the baths at Bath in England, the Roman baths. There's a whole pit full of lead inscriptions of curses, and that was part of their daily life, to work magic, work curses. The idea of like the gypsy witch and all these things that we grow to make fun of. The idea of the green-faced witch, the old hag, was based a little bit in reality. My accusatory witch, I love her because she stands by my front door pointing her finger in judgment at people. But the idea of the witch was, there's a poem that's been going around recently that no one knows exactly who wrote it, but it's about the green-faced witch and how that was a product of the witch tortures, that she was beaten and ripped apart and paraded through town looking like a broken old hag. And that's possible. The witch trials weren't about witchcraft, they were about devil worship. Those who were accused of witchcraft were accused of consorting with the devil. It was a trial about the devil. And so there's a little bit of controversy, over the years with Wiccans kind of, accepting that they were after these wise women of the woods and stuff. And no, they were just after women because they had property and they had things, and they, wanted to punish them. Or during the auto da fe, the Christian, witch trials, they were just to get rid of Jews, non-Catholic Christians, generally just as a way of controlling the populace. And then sadistic Christians, had their way. Sadistic Catholics, I should say, had their way, especially in France. Philip and his assorted people. But a good old Queen Elizabeth took care of that. Sunk his armada, some believe through witchcraft. They raised a storm and pushed it out to sea, and destroyed the Spanish armada. So with that kind of set the witch trials back. But more back to wicked witches, and the idea of, like, right here, like, here's your basic Halloween witch. And I think it's endearing. It's a powerful old crone. It's the wicked witch of the woods, and it's been turned into something people fear, mainly because they don't understand it. And what people don't understand, they destroy. It's a simple adage. I'm going to paraphrase from Clive Barker's Nightbreeder, Cabal, it's like what people envy, you know, they destroy. And people would envy someone who could cast spells, change reality, know how to use herbs and poisons and things and do stuff. So, you know, that was what became a something to envy, something to destroy. Though there are, you know, the idea of the witches and superstition, especially in some countries like Iceland and things like that, are pretty crazy. Making pants out of dead people's skin to wear them to gain their power, all kinds of, you know, really bizarre. But those bizarre times create bizarre people. But witches did know a few things, like what they'll talk about, the witch's flying ointment, which is made out of all nightshades and hallucinogenic ingredients. But like, and here's something I'll clear up a myth right now. When you see old depictions of witches riding on brooms, they're always riding with the bristles pointing forward and the broom mysteriously disappearing into their nether regions. And the reason for that was this. The witch's flying ointment was made out of henbane, mandrake, datura, belladonna, all these different hallucinogenic poisonous nightshades. And it was mixed with fat, and they smeared it all over their naked bodies. They danced around fires to sweat it into their skin, and they also applied it to the end of broomsticks and applied it genitally or anally, and basically they were tripping out crazy, naked people running through the woods. So the brooms went in and they didn't go out. And that was a little bit of, you know, if you look at old woodcuts and drawings from the 1800s and things like that, they'll depict it that way. More hocus pocusy eras, and I do love that movie, and I think it's a great depiction of witches in that they're like fairy tale witches. They want to eat children, they live in the woods, and they cast spells, and they're in league with the devil. I think it's a fine Disney film, and everyone should watch it. It's its 20th anniversary this year, and it should be how you start any holiday season, but especially Halloween. Now, on to Hulda. Hulda was a witch from this area. I'm in upstate New York, upstate New York, in the Hudson Valley. And Hulda, in this little pamphlet on the Tales of the Old Dutch Burial Ground, which, you know, it's not online, it's about 30, 40 years old, and lists all the people buried in the old Dutch burial ground, including the Hessian, who was the Headless Horseman. He's not marked, but he's buried there. But Hulda was a witch. She lived outside the town. She was shunned by the good, uptight Christian weirdos that, you know, were part of all the early settlers of this area in the 1600s. And they tolerated her, shunned her, and she would leave gifts of healing herbs and ointments and things for sick people, and she'd leave it on their porch because they didn't want anything to deal with her. She'd leave it in the night, and they all knew that they could rely on her for certain things and stuff, but they would not be seen with her. And so she lived. She was from Bohemia, you know, so that would make her Eastern European and probably different from the English settlers as far as her accent and her way of life. And she traded with the Indians because she related to them, and she lived in their woods, in the basically the haunted woods of the western woods of outside of Tarrytown, Sleepy Hollow, along the Hudson. Now, along comes the Revolutionary War, and Hulda wanted to join up and fight alongside the men and fight to defend her adopted country. And they turned her down and wouldn't let her. Now, as the war wore on, the men were dying and gone. The only people who were left were old women and old men and children. And she led a battalion against the British, and she was a sharpshooter, and she took out many, many British soldiers with her long rifle and hatchet, I believe, as well. And they finally, they got her, they killed her, and then it became, how do we deal with a witch? How do we bury a witch in a Christian churchyard? And they didn't bury her in the yard, they buried her right outside the churchyard, but nearby, because they did love and respect her in the end. She saved them. But sometimes good deeds don't go you know, rewarded in this world, and every good witch knows that. So Hulda was buried outside the churchyard in an unmarked grave, but she's word of mouth and legend has passed it down over 300 years to the day. and she's remembered. But it just goes to show you that, like, you know, though she was an outsider and a witch and a known witch and an old world witch, she still felt a love for her country and her people, and though they didn't return that love to her, she fought and died for the cause of America. And so it's sort of like a forgotten hero, and probably a good idea for a movie. I'll expect my royalties if any of you make one sometime soon, because you would have known her. A good friend of mine years ago works at the old Dutch cemetery of burial grounds and gave me this book, and it has maps and all kinds of great things. And I'm not going to scan it and put it online. I'm going to keep it as book form. But you can write to me and I'll tell you all kinds of stuff, or maybe you can find it on eBay or things, because part of witchcraft is keeping things hidden or occult. That's what the meaning of occult is. It's hidden and secret, and you know, that's all these things here. Like I keep a book that I write curses and blessings and things, but I write with a vulture quill. This vulture quill was found in a cemetery in Pleasant Valley or Poquay, I'm not quite sure. My good friend Sarah K. Hermans, and I'll mention you in the video, so now she's a historian and whatnot, she gave me a bag of these feathers. Found in a cemetery, so there's an intrinsic magic in this, and that's what witchcraft's about, finding the magic in the world around you and making that happen, not abiding by a set of rules written in a book. Written in a book 50 years ago. You know, that's a little bit of I think a scam in a sense, trying to convince people that this has been around for 2,000 years when the book was written 50 years ago. But everybody knows natural magic and natural witches, and witches, like people, are good or bad. I'm a little more of a bad witch, but that's okay. You know, I'm a nice guy sometimes. And I have we're going to show throughout this video some of my collection. Out by my witch house is a carved wooden witch, like a carved chainsaw bear, but it's a witch, and she's made from a old elm tree that was struck by lightning and fell on a cemetery fence. So when I heard that story from the wood carver that he had this piece of wood, I commissioned Hulda outside. She lives out in my backyard too, because she protects my house, and she's the witch of the woods in my small yard here. So that's, you know, and on my table here, and I'm going to end with this is probably a part 2, but there's a liquor. This is about me. I'm Italian, and I come from an area, Benevento. This is Strega, the witch liquor. I use it in a lot of drinks in my Cocktail Vultures blog because I like Strega, and I'm a witch, and I like witch liquors. But short story about Benevento is that it used to be called Malavento, or Bad Journey. And about 100 years ago or so, they changed the name of the town to Benevento to mean Good Journey, because it was a place of the witches. It was a place of gypsies, witches, bandits, thieves, and strange occurrences. But there's a liquor, 71 herbal ingredients to make this kind of, actually very tasty, it's sort of like Italian absinthe in that it's made of strange herbs and stuff like that. But on the bottle, which you'll have to get a close-up, but there's the seal of the town is a witch. Strega, Italian for witch. And they understand that in that culture, though it was called Malavento and it was a bad area, that the witches, you know, played an important part of history. They're respected, kept distant, but that's what they were there for, is that they had powers that regular people didn't have, and if you beseech them with money, coin, or trade, they might help you. And of course, the bad stories come from people who didn't get what they wanted, who didn't, you know, who wanted a love spell but they were unlovable, wanted a revenge spell but they had no right for revenge, and so they rightfully in their minds attacked the witches. But that's what we are. We're all witches in one way or another. Like I say about a lot of things, you know, especially up here in the Hudson Valley, there are more witches than not. So, well, this is Strega, and the bottle's almost empty because I do drink it, and a little bit of water in my glass. But it's a sweet, yellowy liqueur made from all the herbs and spices and things gathered in this part of southern Italy, around Benevento, Calabria. And if you look close enough, real witches are everywhere. They're in your liquor store, they're in your bookstore, they're buried alongside Revolutionary War heroes, they're buried alongside legend and Sleepy Hollow. They're in our Halloween, and I think I'm here to praise the witches and you know, enjoy the witches, and enjoy even on TV right now. I mean, by the time you see this, it'll probably be in the 3rd or 4th episode of American Horror Stories, and it's all about witches. So here's to us witches, here's to the dark side, and here's to seeing you sometime soon.